You ever find yourself in one of those moments where right and wrong start to blur so fast, you don't even realize you're stepping over the line? Yeah, me neither, or at least, that's what I used to think. I'm 59 years old enough to know better. And yet, here I am, looking back on something I still can't fully explain. It all started the night my stepson, Ryan, came home for a visit. He's in his late 20s, full of energy, the kind of guy who lights up a room without even trying. Ryan's got this easy charm, that effortless grin that makes people like him on sight. But to me, he's always just been Ryan, my wife's son from her first marriage. That night, he showed up the way he always does, bags dropped in the hallway, big hugs all around, like he owned the place. My wife, Melissa, had been counting down the days till he arrived, so they jumped right into catching up, laughing loud enough to shake the walls. Me? I hung back, as usual, letting them have their little reunion. At some point, Ryan mentioned he had weekend plans but wanted to take it easy that night. You still got that hot tub out back? He asked, stretching like he'd just run a marathon. Could really use it after that drive. Melissa chuckled. Still there. Probably needs some TLC, though. I chimed in. It's fine. Cleaned it last week. Water's fresh. Ryan's eyes lit up. Perfect. Mind if I hop in? Of course not, I said. Make yourself at home. And just like that, he was outside, sinking into the steaming water, drink in hand. I stayed inside, tidying up, half listening to the muffled conversation drifting in through the patio door. Everything felt normal. Until it didn't. Melissa's phone rang, work call. She huffed but took it, disappearing into the study. That left Ryan outside alone. That's when I noticed, the patio light was still off. The backyard was dark except for the soft glow of the hot tub. Ryan was just sitting there, the steam rising around him. I grabbed my glass of water and stepped onto the deck. You good out here? Ryan looked up, grinning. Yeah, just relaxing. You should join me. Water's great. I hesitated. Nothing weird about hanging out as a family, but something about this felt different. Still, I didn't want to make a thing of it. Maybe I will, I said casually. And that's when the air shifted. I stood there, glass in hand, feeling off. Ryan leaned back, completely at ease, like he belonged there. His invitation had been casual, but the way he looked at me, friendly, sure, but with something else underneath, made my stomach tighten. You really should, he said again, flashing that grin. No point in having a hot tub if you don't use it. I laughed, a little too quick. I don't use it nearly as much as I should. Then now's the perfect time. He gestured to the other side of the tub. Come on, you deserve to relax too. I glanced back toward the house. Through the glass doors, I could see Melissa pacing, still on the phone. It felt dumb to hesitate. Ryan was my stepson. It was just a hot tub. All right, I said finally, setting my glass down. But just for a little while. Inside, I changed into something comfortable, but as I rifled through my drawers, an odd mix of excitement and unease settled over me. Why was I overthinking this? It wasn't like I was doing anything wrong. I told myself to relax. When I stepped back onto the deck, Ryan smiled. There you go. Now you're ready to enjoy life a little. I laughed, brushing off the strange flutter in my chest, and slid into the hot tub, settling in across from him. The warmth wrapped around me, easing the tension in my shoulders. For a moment, I let myself enjoy it. We sat in silence for a while, just the faint hum of traffic in the distance, the occasional rustle of leaves. This is nice, I admitted, sinking deeper into the water. Told you, Ryan said, stretching his arms along the edge. Sometimes you just gotta slow down, appreciate the little things. I nodded, but something in the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about the hot tub, sent a prickle up my spine. His eyes held mine a second too long. I looked away, focusing on the bubbles rising between us. We started chatting, small talk. His job, his weekend plans, how much he missed visiting. The words flowed easily, too easily. Ryan had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. It was charming. Or maybe it was calculated. Then, he said something that threw me. You don't act your age. I laughed, caught off guard. What's that supposed to mean? It's a compliment, he said quickly, his tone light, but his eyes steady. You've got this energy about you. Like you're still curious about life, open to new things. Most people your age? They shut down. Get stuck in their ways. I wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or uneasy. Well, thanks, I guess. Ryan smirked, lifting his glass in a toast. Take it however you want. It's the truth. Heat rose to my face, and it wasn't from the water. There was something in his voice, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Just as I was about to change the subject, Ryan shifted forward slightly, his eyes locked on mine. You ever think about what it'd be like to do something completely unexpected? The question hung between us, thick and heavy. I stared at him, my throat suddenly dry. Completely unexpected? I echoed, trying to sound casual, though my voice wavered. Like what? He leaned back again, but his gaze never wavered. You know, something different. Something that breaks the routine. He swirled his drink, like he was just making conversation. But that look on his face, it said otherwise. I forced a chuckle, trying to shake off the weight of his words. I don't think my life's that predictable. I've had my fair share of surprises. Yeah? He raised an eyebrow. Like what? I hesitated. My mind raced for an answer that wouldn't sound forced or ridiculous. Well, marrying your mom was unexpected, I said with a chuckle, hoping to steer things onto safer ground. Ryan smiled, but it wasn't just amusement, it was knowing. Like he saw straight through my attempt to deflect. Fair enough, he said. But I meant something just for you. Not about her. Not about anyone else. Just you. Something you've never done because it felt too risky. I swallowed hard. His words settled over me like a thick, heavy blanket. And for the first time that night, I wondered if I was in way over my head. You ever find yourself in a situation where right and wrong start blending together so fast, you don't even notice when you've crossed a line? Yeah, me neither, at least, that's what I used to think. I'm 59 years old. Old enough to know better, old enough to have seen a thing or two. And yet, here I am, thinking back on a moment I still can't quite wrap my head around. It all started one evening when my stepson, Ryan, came home for a visit. He's in his late 20s, always buzzing with energy, the kind of guy who can walk into a room and have everyone eating out of the palm of his hand without even trying. He's got this easy confidence about him, one of those grins that could talk its way out of a speeding ticket. But to me, he was just Ryan, my wife's son from her first marriage. That night, he burst through the door like he always did, dropping his bags in the hallway and pulling everyone into those big, effortless hugs of his. Lisa, my wife, had been talking about his visit for weeks. The moment he arrived, they fell into easy conversation, catching up on every little thing like best friends who hadn't seen each other in years. I stayed in the background, like I usually do, letting them have their time. At some point, Ryan mentioned he had weekend plans but just wanted to relax that evening. You still have the hot tub out back? He asked, stretching out like the drive had worn him down. Could really use it after the trip. Lisa chuckled. It's still there. Probably needs some love, though. I jumped in. It's fine. Cleaned it last week. Water's fresh. Ryan's face lit up. Perfect. Mind if I hop in? Of course not, I said. Make yourself at home. A little while later, he was outside, settled into the steaming water with a drink in hand. I stayed inside, wiping down the counters, listening to the low murmur of their conversation through the open patio door. Everything felt normal. Until it didn't. Lisa's phone rang. Work call. One she couldn't ignore. She excused herself, disappearing into the study, leaving Ryan out there alone. That's when I noticed, the patio light was still off. The backyard was dark, except for the soft glow of the hot tub. I grabbed my glass of water and stepped outside. You good out here? Ryan looked up, smiling. Yeah, just unwinding. You should join me, the water's great. I hesitated. Wasn't unusual for us to spend time together as a family, but something about the way he said it made me pause. Still, I shrugged it off. No reason to overthink. Maybe I will, I said casually. Come on, he urged. You can't let this go to waste. I glanced toward the house. Lisa was still on her call, voice muffled behind the study window. It was just a hot tub. Just Ryan. Nothing more. All right, I said, setting my glass down. But just for a little while. Inside, I changed into something comfortable, but as I rummaged through my drawers, I felt this odd mix of nerves and anticipation. Stupid, right? It was just a chance to unwind, nothing more. When I stepped back onto the deck, Ryan grinned. There you go. Now you're ready to enjoy life a little. I laughed, brushing off the strange flutter in my chest, and slid into the hot water, taking the seat opposite him. The heat wrapped around me, loosening my muscles, making it easier to pretend there was nothing unusual about this. This is nice, I admitted, sinking deeper into the warmth. See? Ryan leaned his head back, smirking. Sometimes you just gotta slow down and enjoy the little things. I nodded, but something about the way he said it made me feel like he wasn't just talking about the hot tub. His gaze lingered a second too long, and I quickly looked away, focusing on the swirling bubbles. We started chatting, mostly small talk about his job, his plans, how long it had been since his last visit. The conversation flowed easily. Too easily. Ryan had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world that mattered when he was talking to you. And for the first time, I wondered if that was just his natural charm or something more deliberate. Then he caught me off guard. You know, you don't act your age. I laughed, unsure of what he meant. What's that supposed to mean? He smirked. It's a compliment. You've got this energy about you. Like you're still curious about the world, still open to new experiences. Most people your age, they've already closed themselves off. I wasn't sure if I should be flattered or uncomfortable. Well, thanks. I think. Ryan raised his glass in a mock toast. Take it however you want. It's just the truth. I felt my face warm, not just from the water. There was something in his tone, an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked onto mine. You ever think about what it'd be like to just do something unexpected? The question sat between us, heavy and loaded. I swallowed hard. Unexpected? I echoed, forcing a chuckle. Like what? He leaned back again, swirling his drink lazily. I don't know. Just something different. Something that breaks the routine. I tried to laugh it off. I don't think my life's that predictable. I've had my fair share of surprises. Yeah? He raised an eyebrow. Like what? I hesitated. My mind scrambled for an answer that wouldn't sound too trivial. Well, marrying your mom was unexpected, I said with a chuckle, hoping to steer things onto safer ground. Ryan smiled, but it was a knowing smile. Like he saw right through me. Fair enough, he said. But I meant something just for you. Something that's not about anyone else. Something you've never done because it felt too risky. I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. Before I could answer, Lisa's voice rang out from inside the house. Ryan, you still out there? The moment shattered. I turned toward the door, voice louder than necessary. We're here. Lisa stepped onto the deck, smiling. Hope you're not hogging all the fun out here. Ryan leaned back, unreadable. Just catching up, Mom. You should join us. She laughed, shaking her head. Not tonight. Got an early morning. She looked at me, giving me that warm, familiar smile. Don't stay out too late, okay? I nodded. We won't. Lisa waved and headed back inside, leaving me alone with Ryan again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The water bubbled between us, the silence thick. Then Ryan smirked. Guess you're not playing it so safe anymore, he said quietly. I had no idea what to say to that. The tension lingered, stretching between us like something unspoken but understood. I tried to focus on the warmth of the water, but my mind kept replaying his words, his tone, that look in his eyes. You're still thinking about what I said, he murmured, breaking the silence. I glanced up, startled. Not really, I lied. Just, enjoying the quiet. Ryan chuckled. You're a terrible liar, you know that? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He leaned back, stretching his arms along the edge of the tub. You don't have to overthink everything, he said gently. Sometimes, you just have to let go. I looked away, heart pounding. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to step back, or take the plunge. The way he said it, it didn't feel like just some passing thought, it felt like an invitation. To what, I wasn't sure. I guess I haven't really thought about it, I admitted, my voice quieter now. I've always been the type to play it safe. Eric tilted his head slightly, studying me. I don't believe that, he said, plain and simple. His confidence threw me off. Why not? Because if that were true, you wouldn't be out here right now. His voice was low, deliberate. I didn't know how to respond because, well, he had a point. I could have easily stayed inside, made up an excuse not to join him, but here I was, sitting across from him in the warm glow of the hot tub, my heart pounding for reasons I didn't want to acknowledge. Before I could come up with anything to say, Eric leaned forward again, resting his elbows on his knees. You ever wondered if there's more to life than what we settle for? His tone softened, carrying a hint of vulnerability. It was a simple question, but damn if it didn't hit me like a truck. Did I wonder? Of course, I did. I think everyone does, especially when they reach my age. But saying it out loud? That felt dangerous, like opening a door I wasn't sure I could close again. I think everyone wonders that, I said carefully, choosing my words with caution. But wondering and actually doing something about it are two very different things. Eric nodded slowly, his gaze locked on mine. True, he admitted. But sometimes, all it takes is one moment to change everything. A chill ran down my spine, and it wasn't from the night air. There was something in the way he said it, in his voice, that made me feel like we were standing at the edge of something neither of us fully understood. And then, just like that, the moment shattered. Eric? You still out there? Claude's voice rang out from inside the house. I turned my head quickly, seizing the excuse to break eye contact. We're here. I called back, my voice a little too loud. The door slid open, and Claude stepped onto the deck, his usual easygoing smile on his face. Hope you're not hogging all the fun out here, he joked, completely oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. Eric leaned back, his expression unreadable. Just catching up, Dad. You should join us. Claude laughed. Not tonight, I've got an early morning. Then he turned to me, his smile warm. Don't stay out too late, okay? I forced a nod. We won't. Claude gave us a wave and headed back inside, leaving me alone with Eric again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the steady bubbling of the hot tub. Then Eric smirked, a small, knowing smirk that made my stomach tighten. Guess you're not playing it so safe anymore, he murmured. I didn't have an answer for that. But one thing was certain, this wasn't over. The air felt heavier after Claude left, thick with something unspoken. I tried to focus on the soothing warmth of the water, but my mind kept circling back to Eric, his words, his tone, the way he looked at me. "You're still thinking about what I said," Eric observed suddenly. His voice startled me. I looked up to find him watching me closely, a hint of amusement playing at his lips. "Not really," I lied, taking a sip of my drink in an attempt to seem indifferent. "Just enjoying the quiet." Eric chuckled. "You're a terrible liar, you know that?" I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He was right, and we both knew it. He stretched his arms along the edge of the tub, still watching me. "You don't have to overthink everything," he said, his voice gentler now. "It's okay to just let go sometimes." I looked away, staring at the ripples in the water. "Letting go isn't as easy as it sounds," I muttered. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but it's worth it." A mix of frustration and confusion bubbled up inside me. What was he doing? Testing me? Pushing me? Or was this all just some meaningless conversation? "Eric," I said finally, my voice firm, "what are you trying to do here?" He tilted his head slightly, considering me. "I'm not trying to do anything," he said, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. "I just think life's too short to always play by the rules." I let out a nervous laugh. "You sound like you're trying to sell me something." "Maybe I am," he said with a shrug. "Or maybe I'm just reminding you that you're still alive, that you're more than just Claude's wife, or a stepmom, or whatever roles you've boxed yourself into." His words hit harder than I expected. I had spent so much time trying to fit into those roles, trying to be what everyone else needed me to be. Hearing it said out loud, especially by him, felt like a wake-up call I wasn't ready for. "You don't know what you're talking about," I said, though even I didn't believe the words as they left my mouth. Eric leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe I don't," he said softly. "But I do know this, you deserve to feel alive. And if no one else is going to remind you of that, then I will." His gaze was so intense, so full of something I couldn't name, that I felt my breath catch. Before I could even process what was happening, he stood up, water streaming off his chest as he grabbed his towel. "I should let you get some rest," he said, casual as ever, like nothing had happened. I just sat there, stunned, watching him wrap the towel around his waist. "Good night," he said, throwing me one last glance before heading inside. I stayed there long after he left, my mind spinning. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't fully understand. And the scariest part? I didn't know if I wanted to step back, or take the plunge. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the conversation replayed in my mind. His words. His expression. The tension in his voice. By morning, I was exhausted, but determined to move past it. It was nothing, I told myself. Just a late-night conversation taken out of context. But when I stepped into the kitchen for my morning coffee, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Eric. "Morning," he said, his voice light, almost cheerful. I forced a smile as I turned to face him. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Not really," I admitted, taking a sip of my coffee. "Too much on my mind." He tilted his head. "Anything you want to talk about?" "No," I said quickly. "Just the usual stuff." Eric smirked like he didn't believe me, but he let it go. He poured himself a coffee, and for a moment, silence stretched between us. I turned my attention to the sink, rinsing out a plate left overnight. Then, behind me, his voice came quieter. "About last night." My hand froze under the running water. "What about it? I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable." I turned off the faucet, took a breath, then faced him. "You didn't," I said, though I wasn't even convinced myself. "It was just unexpected." Eric nodded. "Fair enough." And then, just as the tension thickened, Claude's footsteps echoed down the stairs. Just like that, everything snapped back into place. For now. Claude strolled out onto the deck, completely oblivious to the tension thick in the air. "What are you two up to?" he asked, his voice light and casual, like he hadn't just walked into the middle of something neither Eric nor I knew how to explain. Eric was the first to react, standing up quickly, brushing off his hands like nothing was out of the ordinary. "Just helping out in the garden," he said, his tone smooth but a little too quick, like he was trying to make it sound more natural than it was. Claude, blissfully unaware, grinned. "Well, don't work too hard. Dinner's almost ready." I forced a smile. "We'll be in soon," I replied, keeping my voice as even as I could, though my insides felt like a tangled mess. Claude gave us one last glance before turning back toward the house, and just before he disappeared inside, I caught Eric's eyes again. His expression had shifted, calm, distant, unreadable. Like whatever had been there between us just moments ago had been locked away, buried deep. And then, without another word, he turned and followed his father inside, leaving me standing alone in the garden, the silence pressing in around me. That evening, the air at dinner felt off. Claude, of course, was his usual self, chatting away about his plans for the week, completely oblivious to the strange silence hanging between Eric and me. I barely touched my food, pushing it around my plate, my mind too distracted to focus on anything he was saying. Across the table, Eric wasn't much better. We exchanged glances, quick, fleeting, but heavy. Each one carried a weight of something unspoken, something neither of us dared to put into words. The moment dinner was over, Claude retreated to his study, just like he always did. That left me and Eric alone. I busied myself with cleaning up, hoping that if I kept my hands moving, I could ignore whatever was brewing between us. I wiped down the counters, straightened the chairs, picked up things that didn't need picking up, anything to keep myself occupied. But Eric wasn't one to let silence linger for long. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, his voice calm, but edged with something more. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I didn't look up, just kept wiping down the coffee table as if it were the most important task in the world. "Just tired, I guess," I murmured, hoping the excuse would be enough. Eric wasn't buying it. His footsteps were soft but deliberate as he stepped further into the room. "You've been tired a lot lately." The way he said it, it wasn't just an observation. It was a challenge. I straightened up, finally forcing myself to look at him. "What are you trying to say?" My voice was steady, but inside, I felt anything but. He shrugged, keeping his expression neutral, but there was something in his eyes, something that made my stomach twist. "Nothing," he said, though we both knew that wasn't true. "It just seems like you're carrying more than you need to." I let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Eric, if there's something you want to say, just say it." For a moment, he hesitated. His eyes dropped to the floor, his jaw tense like he was debating whether or not to keep going. Then, he looked back at me, steady, serious, like he had finally made up his mind. "Okay," he said, his voice calm but certain, like he'd been sitting on this for a while. "I think you're afraid." I blinked, caught off guard. "Afraid?" My arms crossed instinctively over my chest. "Afraid of what, exactly?" His expression didn't waver. "Afraid of feeling something you didn't expect to feel," he said simply, stepping closer. His eyes never left mine. His words hit me like an unexpected cold wind, sharp, undeniable. I felt my breath catch, my chest tightening as if the weight of what he just said was pressing down on me. I shook my head, trying to push it all away. "You're imagining things," I murmured, but even as I said it, my voice cracked just enough to betray me. Eric didn't back down. "Am I?" His voice was quiet, steady, but there was something firm beneath it, something that wouldn't let me escape so easily. I turned away from him, needing to put some distance between us. My hands clenched at my sides, and I took a slow breath, forcing myself to hold on to whatever scraps of control I had left. Eric, this is ridiculous, I said, my voice sharper now. Whatever you think is happening here, it's not. For a moment, he didn't answer. And I hoped, he might finally let it go. Let the silence swallow up whatever had just passed between us. But then he moved closer, slow and deliberate, until I could feel the warmth of his presence at my back. You can keep telling yourself that if it makes you feel better, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but we both know it's not true. I spun around, frustration boiling over, my pulse pounding in my ears. Do you even realize what you're doing? My voice was sharp, demanding, like I needed him to wake up, to see how wrong this was. What you're saying? Yes. His answer was simple. Steady. Unshakable. And somehow, that was worse. The air between us felt heavier, charged, like something unspoken had finally surfaced, and there was no stuffing it back down. My whole body was tense, every nerve frayed. I wanted to yell. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to make him understand how impossible this was. But the words wouldn't come. I just stood there, stuck between anger, disbelief, and something else, something I didn't want to name. Eric must have seen it, the war raging inside me. Because finally, after what felt like an eternity, he took a step back. His expression softened, giving me space I didn't even realize I needed. I'm not trying to make this harder for you, he said, quieter now. I just want you to know it's okay to feel alive. And then, just like that, he turned and walked away. Leaving me standing there, drowning in a storm I had no idea how to escape. My heart hammered in my chest. My thoughts spun in 100 different directions. What the hell had just happened? And what was I supposed to do with any of this?